It's great to see you all again for our second class in this introductory module. In the previous session, we began to dismantle the myth that literature is merely a pastime. Today, we'll delve deeper into its role as a first rate sociological artifact. As future planners and managers of ground transportation in the United States, you're not just designing tracks, steel, or route systems, you're shaping people's everyday lives. If we want those designs to be successful, we must learn to decode the symbols, tensions, and aspirations of the society we're working for. Literature doesn't just describe movement, it largely prescribes it and imbues it with a human meaning that transcends any technical calculations. To understand this, we must go back to the idea that literature functions as a mirror of society. Since ancient Greece, thinkers have intuited that art should allow citizens to experience emotions that strengthen the moral fabric of the community. This vision matured until centuries later, scientific sociology taught us that literary history is not only about individual geniuses, but also about the social conditions of production and the impact that works have on public opinion. Imagine this applied to our profession. Every story from a given era gives us vital clues about how the infrastructure of that time conditioned people's freedom or confinement. In the United States, our history has been marked by a constant tension between settlement and mobility. From the oral traditions of Native American peoples, which charted a spiritual map of the land, to colonial literature that sought to legitimize control over space, the way we narrate our relationship with the land has defined our progress. Consider the 19th century, when the arrival of the railroad was seen as a dual symbol, a promise of economic expansion, but also a machine that fractured the natural harmony. Isn't this same tension what we face today when discussing road expansion projects in our cities? To address this rigorously, we rely on fundamental theories. New historicism, for example, teaches us that text and context are inseparable. If you analyze an iconic work about travel, such as On the Road in Jack Kerouac's The Story of a Young Man, you'll see that it's not just a coming of age tale, but an artifact circulating within a larger discourse that includes highway laws and the post war automotive consumer culture. The text allows us to see the cracks between the desire for absolute mobility and the reality of an infrastructure that, while connecting distant points, often ends up segregating communities. On the other hand, cultural materialism reminds us that culture is present in every act, including land travel, forming a complex whole that determines how we perceive time and space. In this 21st century, we face a multicultural society that challenges grand narratives of unity. Diverse authors use narrative to denounce what we call spatial injustice. As planners, this is crucial. The educational and social gaps, highlighted by statistical data, directly translate into who has the power to influence public transportation policies. This is why prestigious institutions require training in the humanities. The goal is to cultivate in you the cultural humility and critical thinking necessary to manage transportation systems in communities with profoundly different histories. In fact, federal regulations, such as the National Environmental Policy Act, require us to consider cultural resources, obligating us to interpret the symbolic value of the spaces we intend to transform. The purpose of integrating this knowledge is to avoid what we call contextual blindness. Without this sensitivity, a road expansion project risks destroying a site of historical or literary significance, generating fierce opposition that could have been avoided simply by understanding the social fabric of the area. Literature gives us that memory of place that technical maps often omit. Furthermore, it trains us in the art of storytelling, allowing us to present mobility plans not as cold cost sheets, but as real improvements in citizens' lives, thus ensuring greater social acceptance. Even in the age of artificial intelligence, professionals who master language can guide technology to ensure that solutions are ethical and contextual. Ultimately, this study provides us with an ethical compass. By studying protest literature, you learn to identify how transportation policies can disproportionately favor certain sectors and create veritable mobility deserts. You are learning to manage innovation, integrating advanced technologies within frameworks that respect local identity, ensuring that your projects are sustainable because they are, above all, valued by the community. I want you to always remember this protocol before launching any project. Research the narrative background, map both historical buildings and the oral histories of the area, and organize workshops where citizens can tell their own mobility stories. Don't fall into the trap of the technocrat who ignores local narratives to impose a standardized design, as this only leads to paralysis and cost overruns. Instead, use narrative translation. Transform complex data and acronyms into tangible consequences for the citizen. By the end of this class, I hope you will see your future professional work not as being confined to mathematics, but as an exciting social responsibility. You are not just technicians, you are critical citizens capable of imagining a more humane and just future for mobility in our country. In conclusion, consider the following. How could you integrate the literary or cultural identity of a specific neighborhood into the design of a new transport station to prevent it from being seen as an external imposition?